Welcome to Humanism in Service with Tiffany Ho, Executive Director of Foundation Beyond Belief, and Sarah Ray of the Humanist Society and Free Thought in Florida podcast and the atheist community of Polk County, and I'm sure many other designations that I'm missing. Turning it over to Sarah and Tiff. Thanks for being here.
I'll go first, I guess. I'm Sarah Ray. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm coming to you today from the ancestral lands of the Tocobega and Seminole in Polk County, Florida. And yes, I'm a board member of the Humanist Society. I'm a humanist celebrant. I lead a peer support group with recovering from religion. I've got a lot of things going on. And I am a co-founder and director of the atheist community of Polk County, which is also a Foundation Beyond Belief network team. And so that's my connection with my co-presenter today, Tiff.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Tiff Ho, and I am the Executive Director of Foundation Beyond Belief. Like Sarah said, I know her through our Beyond Belief network. Atheist community in Polk County is one of our most active volunteer teams. Right now, Foundation Beyond Belief has a lot of humanist projects coming up, and so I'll be talking a little bit about that as well as writing this presentation.
Awesome. Maybe if I could just sort of frame for myself, for the audience, what sort of drew me to want to have this conversation really in the first place, as I was thinking about all of the things that our organization does in the idea of community service. And you know, we can talk about this in a little bit more detail. But we helped start a food pantry in the middle of a pandemic that delivered food to people rather than asking them to come to us, that did not require a lot of red tape and restrictions for people to be able to receive those services. And we do outreach with homeless communities, providing hot meals to them and hygiene supplies and that sort of thing. But as a sort of a new organizer in the secular space, we started our organization about 3 years ago. An observation that I'd like to share, and not for good or bad, just for something that we should probably set on the table and poke at a little bit, is the observation that when we organize groups specifically around the label of humanism, I feel that we tend to draw the thinkers and the talkers. When we organize groups around atheist labels, we tend to get the firebrand activist doer types. And obviously that's not an absolute, right? There's certainly crossover in a Venn diagram, but I think that's something for me, when I think of what humanism means to me, what my humanism is as a value, and a set of values, it isn't sitting around talking about philosophy. It's the idea that as we are all human, we all have a value, we're more alike than different, and so we have an obligation to take care of each other. And that for me translates into going out and doing this sort of service work, sort of in the name of humanism. That's why I chose my Humanism at Work FBB shirt for today. So just an observation that I tend to notice, and I hope that, like, as we go through this conversation and answer questions and get people thinking about, you know, what are you doing with your humanism? Are we out there doing community service work, and how can you sort of bring that to what you do?
Yeah, I think you make a great point, Sarah. One of the things that I have noticed is when you go to someone and you say, I'm a humanist, they don't really know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
So start to explain that. And I think maybe when you have atheism, you know exactly what an atheist means. And so because of that, you got that organizing, a lot of the activism that comes with it. But humanism does seem very much like a philosophical term. And that's where you get more of the talk rather than the service, the acting, the organizing around that. And I really hope that we are able to, through this conversation, change perception and put out there what humanism really is.
Yeah.
So how did you come across humanism, Sarah?
Humanism for me really came out of the angry atheist phase. And this is sort of an extension of what I just mentioned. I tell people all the time, like, atheism for me is meaningless without humanism. It's the answer to one question. Do you believe in a God or gods? No. Great. That doesn't tell you anything about what I do value or care about or whatnot. And humanism does. And so for me, I feel a little bit like, humanism is kind of useless on it, or sorry, atheism is kind of useless on its own. Um, so I grew up in a pretty vanilla Christian faith in the Midwest in Illinois, and I, I at one point was on track. I thought to go into the ministry and be a religious leader, and that came crashing down when a youth pastor had me reading through the Bible and writing down all the truths and promises. And we were doing this deep weekly Bible study where we were just going through the Bible. And the more I read, the less I believed. And that sort of brought me out of religion. And then I was an apatheist for a long, long time. Maybe there is a God, maybe there's not a God. I don't know. But it doesn't seem to affect my life. So I'm just going to go on living my life. And then I moved to Florida and really started getting engaged around advocacy on trans rights and LGBTQ issues. And we started our podcast. It's been 5 or 6 years now. And that podcast, we were talking about a lot of GSRM rights issues. That's gender, sexual, and romantic minorities. It's my preferred replacement for LGBTQ. um, and I'm happy to talk about that another time too. So I was finding that a lot of time the opposition to those to our right to exist in a free society generally came from a place of religion. And so that brought me into an angry atheist phase where, religion is harming my people and I'm mad about it. And then I got into community organizing, and we created the countywide organization, and started like actually getting people together in a room and not just banging on keyboards, behind the anonymity of the internet. And that really grew into like, okay, great, we're all atheists. What do we do with that? And the answer to that is humanism.
I love that story that you have, because it's just such a different background from my own as well. But we both came to humanism, and we kind of both share the same values. But for myself, I came from a Buddhist family, very secular, despite being Buddhist. It's so cultural in a lot of Asian cultures, where we have this mix of spirituality and also sort of like different cultural elements depending upon which country you're from. But one of the things in Buddhism is actually humanism, which is really interesting to me. There's this idea of all being equal and being in this connected world. And so for myself, even though I wasn't very spiritual or very religious growing up, that is something that I took with me. And as I got older, being an Asian American, also being a woman, there were certain experiences I had faced, and I was just like, humanism can really solve these issues if we just looked at each other as being connected, our actions affecting each other. And I got into a lot of activism, also a lot of volunteering, mostly with other marginalized groups, underrepresented groups. Then I came to Foundation Beyond Belief, and I discovered sort of the more secular part of things. And it's just been really interesting to see how people from different backgrounds, like yourself, Sarah, and me, we come in to share these same values.
Yeah, there's definitely a common ground to work from. And I think that extends far beyond the secular label soup too, right? And we often talk about like one of the great things about humanism, especially when it comes to service, is the necessity and ability to work with religious organizations where common ground exists. So we've seen that in our groups where the food pantry that we started, there were you know, the Unitarian Universalist Church was part of that. A drag queen ex-pastor was part of that. It was just this really great, diverse group of people. But we have to, you know, we can't just go religion bad and then go to our own silo. We have to be willing to, you know, set a good line in the sand. Our line was, um, you don't discriminate against minority classes of people, and um, you don't put roadblocks in the way of people to get the services that you're providing. And if, as long as you meet that criteria, like you're not doing that stuff, we'll work with you. And that's, you know, we can disagree on God questions and the philosophical and all of that, but we're taking care of people, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think the best policy is really just, I'm going to respect your opinions. I might not necessarily agree with them. No, I don't believe in God, but as long as we're working towards the same goals and you're not trying to force your beliefs on me,
Yeah.
let's work together.
Yeah,
and do
absolutely.
more. I think
Yeah.
there's way too much division right now. Just you see it between different underrepresented groups, with women, with people of color, with, I'm sorry, what was the term you used, Sarah?
GSRM.
With people from the GSRM community. So I think it's great to look at what our similarities are and focus on those humanist values. And that way we can kind of do work together, as opposed to focusing on what the differences between us are. Again, as long as we respect each other's beliefs, it's an entirely different thing when someone's like, I believe in God and you have to too.
And I guess maybe if I could go back to sort of my original challenge on the middle of the table, the idea of like there is a time and place and a need for the thinkers and the talkers to get together and have conversations about a high philosophy and that sort of thing. That's not my bag. If it's yours, great. And so there's sort of a time and place for all of these different components, and the goal I think is plugging them all in together to really make sort of a unified coalition of different types of people. If your local group can meet the needs of the free thought humanist folks who want to sit and talk philosophy, and the people who want to go out and do, you know, roadway cleanups and food and clothing drives and that sort of thing, and the people who want to listen to speakers to learn about you know, other topics of interest to our community. The people who are interested in legislation that want to get, you know, out there and write letters to their Congress people and letters to the editor. Like there's so much for people to do in our movement. And so I don't want my initial my initial comment to be taken as like, you know, oh, there's a problem here. But I do really want to underscore this idea of like humanism at its core to me is doing this type of service, is going out and putting your values into action.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree that there's a need to talk about it, to talk about what connects us as humanists, what are those values, and so we can outline them. Because it's hard to put those into practice when you don't really know what it is. Again, humanism is not so commonly understood by a lot of people, even I think by humanists ourselves. So when we talk about it, we can kind of outline that. And then the next step is putting those beliefs into practice, whether it is, again, like you said, through activism, or you and I actually both see humanism as service. So for those of us who really focus on that, are able to put humanist values into making an impact in local communities. I know ACPC does some great work there. And then others see impact as activism. There's all sorts of different forms, but definitely there is a time and place for talking about it, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Why don't you, in our last few minutes here, why don't you talk a little bit about just sort of what you've observed since you came to Foundation Beyond Belief in the diverse collective of groups that sort of have come around that organization, that are all over the world doing this kind of humanist service that we're talking about.
Yeah. One of the things I've noticed is that, that's a great question. One of the things I noticed is a lot of these groups don't really know where to start, how to start. being able to find other humanists like them has been a challenge. And so FBB, we try to connect them with other groups, with people in the area and service events. And so usually a lot of these groups start out with road cleanups, highway cleanups, and then they kind of move on to things that they're a little bit more interested in. I know ACPC, again, we focus a lot on food and activism. And we have other groups that do so as well. So that's one of the things I've noticed, just getting started is so difficult. And I think it's great, not only Foundation Beyond Belief, but other groups, other national groups have been able to connect local groups with each other, individuals with each other. So I love the community that we're trying to build together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my advice would be, if you're looking into, maybe starting a group, or you're starting a new project, the way we sort of approached it is, you're the champion, and if you're the only one out there picking up trash off the side of the road one week, or for a month worth of weeks, whatever it is, like, be okay with that, right? That it's a need, you're still out there meeting a need, and people are seeing you do it, and others will then kind of gravitate towards you eventually, as that sort of becomes publicized, and that sort of thing. But just do it. Like, my biggest advice is, like, it looks scary, I get it, but, like, just jump in there and do it. And we hear so often that people say things like, "Oh, well, there's nobody like me here." And I'm here to tell you, how many times have I heard, I thought I was the only atheist in Polk County, Florida, the only humanist, the only free thinker, the only agnostic. I hear it all the time. And so you're not alone. Know that. And knowing that there are groups that do exist already. You can go to the American Humanist Association and look up chapters and affiliates, and there are other national organizations too. And we're all connected. In that way. So yeah, just get started. Pick a thing that you're passionate about, and just go start one little small thing towards that passion.
Well, thank you so much, Tiff and Sarah. That was great. And Sarah, that was a great way to end the discussion part of the session. We do have several questions here in the Q&A that I can ask you. One is, are there areas in which you think humanists should, areas of service or kinds of service projects, where you think that humanists can or should seek to take the lead? And are there other areas where you think we should play more of an ally or support role? Or do you think we should just sort of be willing to jump in whatever need needs to be filled in a community?
If you want to take that first.
Yeah. So I think that's a tough question, because as humanists, one of the things that I see humanism as is being interconnected and being all equal to each other, recognizing the common elements in each other. Because of that, I do feel humanists should be focusing in on advocacy, on activism, on other issues affecting a lot of underrepresented groups. And we do have a few national organizations that do that. Foundation Beyond Belief really focuses more on the service side of things. The reason why I said it was sort of a tough question is because when you're dealing those kinds of issues, you really have to make sure that you're not overstepping and talking over the marginalized voices. You always want those voices to be in the lead. So being able to take more of a support role is important, but also being prominent in that and saying that as humanists, this is a common value of ours. It is really integral to who we are. So those are projects that I do believe are very important. And then again, I don't feel like there's enough focus on service. Sarah and I both focus on the service part of things. And that's one of the ways to identify common humanity. Right now, Foundation Beyond Belief is focusing in on food security because even though there's been decades of progress, recently there's been a reversal of that. In the US alone, there's 1 in 4 families suffering from food insecurity. So those are projects also that humanists can take the lead on.
Can I get angry for a minute?
Sure.
Yeah, yes, and I would even expand that out to beyond to just the basic human needs, right? I want to live in a world where nobody's worried about where they're going to sleep tonight, whether they're going to have a meal before they go to bed, what their kids are going to eat on the weekend when they're not at school. Medical care, mental health care, all of these basic necessities of life. Um, Speaking, specifically for the U.S., we live in the wealthiest nation on the planet. And what are we doing with it? We're shooting rich people off into rockets. I'm angry because I don't know how you sleep at night when you get done with that flight, knowing that there are families sleeping under bridges. I could not sleep at night knowing that. And so for me, it's knowing that we could solve hunger and homelessness tonight by dinner time. We could have it solved if we just decided to do it. Now, yes, that means government programs that are designed to uplift people out of the impoverished conditions that they may find themselves in and create new safety nets to prevent people from ever falling into that position again. But I feel like, don't we have a moral obligation to create that minimum basic threshold of life for our neighbors?
Yeah. I think that everybody deserves those basic necessities: food, water, shelter. Those are really just the bare minimum that everyone should have access to, and unfortunately we don't. And like Sarah said, it's a lot of the systemic issues where we have so many. We are a wealthy country and we have billionaires who can afford to solve world hunger, who can afford to provide water, food to everyone in the world, and they don't. Instead, they're busy on their pet projects. And not to say that, shooting rockets into space isn't, fun or a great project to work
Super
on.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, there's more pressing issues.
Yeah.
That's Maslow's hierarchy. We should be providing that bare minimum right now, and we can afford to. Why aren't we?
Not to switch gears entirely, but one of our questions is, could you please talk, and maybe Tiff, this is for you, could you please talk about the relationship between Foundation Beyond Belief and the AHA?
Yeah, I mean, we have a great relationship with AHA. We recently, or in the past, we were working on humanist disaster recovery, which is one of our flagship programs. Recently we have decided to pivot humanist disaster recovery towards more local communities where people can respond more quickly. But the AHA has provided us very generously with a grant each year to continue that program. And I think that we're complementary in the sense that the AHA does focus more on the advocacy side of things, activism side of things, and we focus more on the service side of things. So whenever our work overlaps, we do partner together.
Thank you. The last question we have here is about, I guess I'm trying to think about how to put this. This is from Judy Gay. She's asking, what do you think of the relationship is with service between volunteering and paid work? Is there a hierarchy? Is there, obviously, we're a nonprofit organization, so some of us are activists who are paid, others from chapters are volunteer. What would you say about that?
Can I tell you what I learned from launching a nonprofit food bank from nothing? Okay. So again, our food pantry program was designed a little differently due to COVID. We were delivering food to people's doorsteps. And so it was sort of like a DoorDash meets Meals on Wheels, but it was prepared food. It was grocery food. And so we were receiving a truck weekly. We were picking up nearly expiring food waste from Walmart 2 or 3 times a week, and we were delivering out to recipients every week. So each one of those truck deliveries or pickups takes 5 or 6 people to go and get the food and bring it back or unload the truck and put it away and then sort it into the boxes and do all those things. And we have great volunteers that did all of that. Then we had a whole core group of people that are like driving 30 routes all over the 5th or 4th, depending on whether you count the water, largest county in the state of Florida. So big area to cover, lots of different routes people are driving, all volunteer. They're paying for their own gas, wear and tear on their vehicles. And at the top of that was our blessed volunteer coordinator who did literally all the work in wrangling all of these people. And if you look at what a successful program might look like, that person at the very least needs to be a full-time position. So if we want to be successful in a lot of our service programs, it's just it's a scale issue where we really do have to pay people for their time. We were a coalition of organizations, and each one of the leaders from the organization that came together, we have our own organizations to run, and we all have day jobs or night jobs and families, and we all had all of these other things going on. And so if you really, I think for a lot of things, but especially for service, if you want to have a successful program, there's got to be somebody who is dedicated to it full time. Just my thoughts.
Yeah. And this is a whole another conversation, but that goes into changing the way we look at the ratio of giving, because a lot of times we don't understand, we don't look at paying staff as doing good work or direct work. But we do need to do that. We have a lot of wonderful volunteers, but they can't necessarily be there consistently. So like Sarah said, having someone who's paid full-time, and full-time staff do also make sacrifices as well. That's really important. At the same time, volunteers are important because I know with FBB, a lot of our service work happens through volunteer teams like ACPC, Atheist United, and several other teams as well. And we wouldn't be able to do that. We simply don't have enough funds to pay everyone to do that and get all that people power. So and they're both important. I think there needs to be a mix.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much for joining us and for talking about this important topic. And I hope that more humanists get involved in humanist service projects. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us.